You said this a little bit earlier, and I'm going to recall our audience back to what you said. It was a bold statement, and you write it in big, bold letters. It's part 1 of this book. Why great communicators are irreplaceable. So that's a bold statement, because we've got this colloquialism that we've all heard. No one is irreplaceable. Here comes best-selling author Carmine Gallo, and he says, great communicators are irreplaceable. I'm going to let you expound on that bold thought. I love it.
Okay. I'm going to give you one example that has really been replicated throughout the country, but I'm going to give you one example that I know recently. A salesperson at a major technology company contacted me not too long ago and gave me a little of his history. 2 years ago, he was a sales engineer, and his career was pretty capped off. It was limited. He wanted to become an evangelist, which is much higher salary, much more visibility, and you get to travel the world. At the time, his boss said, Steve, you're just an engineer. Why don't you just stick to what you know? And Steve stuck to what he did best, but he started reading books, started reading some of my books, like Talk Like TED and some others, started reading other books, watched TED Talks, started working on his presentation skills. Within 2 years, not only is he now an evangelist, he was recognized by the CEO in front of 500, 800 other salespeople at this year's conference. And the CEO said, we need another 10 Steves. Steve his position was about to be eliminated about a year ago. And that's when they gave him the evangelist position, because another competitor said, that guy is the best communicator we've got. We want him, because nobody can explain the technology as well as that guy at company XYZ. They made him a bigger offer, and so his current company said, not only are we going to match and elevate that offer, we're going to give you the title that you originally wanted. They cannot afford to lose him. He's irreplaceable to them. Mm-hmm. Because if you can have the greatest product in the world, if you cannot explain that product in a way that gets your customers excited about the product, connects with people emotionally, then that product may not be nearly as successful as it could be. So yeah, in every company I've ever worked for or with, in terms of a communication consultant, the people who are the better persuaders, the better communicators, they're the ones who get promoted. They're the ones who get the leadership positions. And even if that particular position might be cut, there's always another company that's willing to jump for that person. Great persuaders are irresistible and irreplaceable. I believe that. I believe that after 25 years of studying persuasion.
Yeah, I love it.
Now more than ever.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Now let's bring this down to everybody listening. Carmine, I appreciate what you're saying, but I don't do a lot of communication in my job. I don't have to communicate that much. This is appreciate you coming on, but I'm not sure this book is for me.
Okay, so are you asking me to respond?
Yeah, let's blow that up, because you and I know that's not true. But there are a lot of people who think that way. And of course, I'm making this scenario up, but the reality is this is for people who are in non-public communication roles as well, because I don't think we see how important it is that we are actually persuading well and communicating well.
Ken, again, I'm the messenger. So I don't make judgments about any of this stuff. I just talk to people. I talk to billionaires like Richard Branson. I study some of the greatest persuaders and leaders of our time, and I look at all the studies. And they all tell me the same thing. In fact, over the last few months, since my book was put to bed, LinkedIn and McKinsey, the giant consulting company, both LinkedIn and McKinsey have come out with major surveys, global surveys. They both found exactly the same thing. The number one skill in highest demand and lowest supply is communication and leadership combined, right? Those two put together. But let me give you an ROI, because a lot of people ask me, well, what's the ROI on improving communication skills? This isn't me. I didn't say this. This is Warren Buffett, who repeatedly has told people publicly that they all have to invest, we all have to invest in our skills, in our skill development. We have to be learn-it-alls and not know-it-alls, especially in these times. He says the number one skill that will increase your value by 50% instantly is becoming a better public speaker. Warren Buffett publicly acknowledges that he was terrified of public speaking early in his career. But he said in order for him to attract more clients, he had to become better at it. So he took, at that time, a Dale Carnegie course, a public speaking course, learned to be a better public speaker, volunteered to teach at a local community college, became a better presenter, a better speaker, which he says was the number one skill that got him from where he was as a stock investor and a financial advisor to growing to where he is today. In fact, he thinks so highly of that skill, it's the only degree that he has in his office, in his internal office, and this was on CNBC. Warren Buffett was the most proud, not of the MBA degree, not of the business school degree, but of the public speaking certificate. So if you want to raise your value by 50% instantly, public speaking and communication skills are the fundamental skills that you need to go from average to great. That's the point. You can't be average. You know this. We can't be average anymore. Average only guarantees below average results. Let me give you one more example. Also in the book, I was talking to a venture capital investor behind Airbnb. It's a sort of under the radar, but it's a very influential firm called Y Combinator. They are seed investors to what becomes some of the biggest tech companies of our time. So they were the original seed investor for Airbnb, and they're very influential in Silicon Valley. I talked to one of the partners. He corrected me, Ken. He corrected me, the communication guy. I said, okay, we're talking about this soft skill of communication. And Kenny stopped me. He said, well, wait a minute. What do you mean soft skill? I said, well, it's because a lot of people say this is a soft skill. And he said, Carmine, if you cannot convince me as an entrepreneur, you can't convince me, the investor, to go along on your journey, to get excited about your vision, and you can't do that through narrative, I'm not interested. He said, communication and storytelling and persuasion, those aren't soft skills. They're fundamental to success in entrepreneurship today.
Yeah.
And he was adamant, Ken, and I'll never forget that because he corrected me. He said, I don't like using that word soft skill. It's not.
Well, let's be honest, that communication and persuasion, those skills are huge in just getting along with peer-to-peer relationships and growing peer-to-peer relationships to move up the ladder in any business that you're in. If you're not communicating well or persuading coworkers or clients, you're not going to move up. So let's dive in now because I love you in part 3 of the book, it's how to get from good to great, specifically how to get from good communication and good persuasion to great communication and great persuasion. There's so much here. I'll just throw it to you with a basic question and let you teach. What are some practical things, people that are listening in, they're watching right now, that they can do to begin to see growth in this area?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that you're right. Part 3, after I developed the argument, part 3 is very actionable, tangible, specific tips that you can use today to become a better persuader and a better communicator. I'm going to give you a few that over the last few weeks since my book has been out, people have been asking me about because they sound a little counterintuitive, but they're absolutely fundamental. The first one, the first tip, and again, sounds counterintuitive, if you want to sound smart, use short, simple words. Third grade language is preferable. Third grade language. I brought this, some show and tell. I think we can see it there on the video. There is a high-tech startup in the health insurance space in Silicon Valley, and they were named, it's called Collective Health, and they were named by the Wall Street Journal as being one of the startups to watch. This was in 2017. So I contacted them while I was writing the book, and I noticed something. All of their health insurance material is very simple, like incredibly simple. And I said, what's going on here, guys? The founders are surgeons, professors, economists, and they said, well, Carmine, we've done all the research. And we have found that most people do not know nearly as much as they say they do about any topic, especially healthcare. So when you ask people a simple question like what's a deductible, which is the simplest term, by the way, in health insurance, the simplest, most people still can't give you an accurate answer. And then when you get even more complicated, as health insurance jargon tends to be, you've lost everybody, including people who work in healthcare. So according to their research, they have reduced all of their language in their marketing, not just their marketing material, but all the material that they send to employers for health insurance. They have actually reduced their language to third grade language. And you can measure that with certain tools that are used to measure the readability of textbooks. Educators use it. I use it myself. It's based on the Flesch-Kincaid model.
What is that tool? What is that tool? So if I'm writing something, a blog post, and I want to third grade it up, how would I do that?
First, Ken, do you know how hard it is to reduce content to third grade language?
I know.
It's actually very hard to do.
I imagine.
I think the chapter, I'll give you a little insight. I think the chapter where I wrote that about third grade language.
It's chapter 13.
I tried my hardest to reduce it to third grade language. And I think the best I did was get it to like sixth grade language or something like that. And I acknowledge that. It's very hard to do. I use an app called Hemingway, which is a paid for app, but it's not that expensive. You buy it at any one time. But there are other apps. They're all based on what's called Flesch-Kincaid models. So these are like readability apps. And they're used for textbooks. So you could actually put in text. And they look at sentence structure, how simple sentences are. They look at words. Are your words being written for a PhD level? Or are your words being written for more of a grade school language? Third grade, by the way, is probably a little low. The apps that I use tend to be okay with 8th grade, 9th grade language. They said that's good. That's good. Steve Jobs, remember that famous ad, or certainly your viewers have heard about it, the Crazy Ones ad. Remember that famous ad?
Oh, sure.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the square pegs in the round holes. I took the content from that entire ad campaign, put it into the readability app, and it was third grade language. So here's the point. If you want to reach a wider group of people who might be somewhat unfamiliar with your product or service, make sure that your language and the words you use are in grade school language. If you are speaking with verbiage that only a PhD or another peer would understand, then you're making it too complicated for your audience.